The red wine wasn't even dry on her $5,000 dress when my stepmother did the unthinkable. She grabbed me by the arm, threw me out in front of 30 guests, and locked the door. But what happened next in that Rolls-Royce changed everything I thought I knew about love. If you've ever been humiliated by your own family in front of others, this story will show you that sometimes one moment of cruelty leads to the greatest blessing of your life. Don't skip ahead. The ending will shock you. My name is Jessica, and I'm about to tell you how one spilled drink changed my entire life forever. 2 years ago, when my father passed away, I thought the worst thing that could happen to me had already happened. I was wrong. The worst was yet to come, but so was the best. My father left me our family house when he died. It wasn't huge, but it was beautiful, with a garden my mother used to tend before she passed when I was little. My stepmother Carol moved in when I was 15, bringing her daughter Amy with her. At first, I was grateful to have a family again. I was so naive. Carol always made it clear that I wasn't really her daughter. Amy, who was 2 years younger than me, got everything she wanted while I worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table and pay the bills. Carol never worked a day, and Amy treated me like I was the help rather than the person actually paying for her lifestyle. But I told myself that family meant sacrifice, that maybe if I just tried harder, they would love me the way I loved them. The night everything changed started like any other disaster in my life, with Carol's big plans. She decided to throw her annual charity fundraiser at our house, except she called it her house when talking to her fancy friends. The guest list was impressive. Mrs. Patterson, the wealthiest woman in town, Mr. Johnson, who owned half the businesses downtown, and about 30 other people who could make or break Carol's social standing. I should have known something was wrong when Carol handed me a white dress and told me I'd be serving drinks, not attending as her daughter, but working as the help. Amy got to wear a beautiful red dress and mingle with the guests as the daughter of the house, while I was expected to smile and serve people who had no idea I actually owned the home they were standing in. The preparation took weeks. I worked extra hours at both my jobs to pay for the expensive food, the decorations, the flowers. Carol kept reminding me how important this event was for her reputation, how I better not mess anything up. The pressure was suffocating, but I convinced myself that maybe if this party went well, she'd finally see me as part of the family. The evening of the party, I stood in the kitchen wearing that simple white dress, loading silver trays with glasses of expensive red wine. Through the doorway, I could see Amy laughing with guests, playing the perfect daughter role. Carol was in her element, greeting people like she was the queen of our small town. And there I was, invisible unless someone needed their glass refilled. Mrs. Patterson was the star guest of the evening. She wore an incredible cream-colored designer gown that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Carol had been trying to get into her inner circle for years, and tonight felt like her big chance. I knew I had to be extra careful around her. Everything was going smoothly until I picked up a tray of red wine glasses to take to the living room. The tray was heavier than usual, and I was already tired from working a double shift that day, but I managed it carefully. I had done this 100 times before at various events. What I didn't see was Amy positioning herself right in my path. I was focused on not spilling anything when I felt something hard against my ankle. Amy had deliberately stuck her foot out, and before I could catch myself, I was falling forward. The tray flew from my hands, and every single glass of deep red wine went flying through the air in what felt like slow motion. The sound of glass breaking seemed to echo forever, but it was nothing compared to Mrs. Patterson's scream when the wine hit her. Her beautiful cream gown was completely ruined, red wine soaking through the expensive fabric. The entire room went silent. 30 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me, standing there in shock with broken glass at my feet. Mrs. Patterson was furious. "My dress! This is a $5,000 designer original." She was practically shaking with rage, red wine dripping from the delicate beadwork. "How could you be so clumsy?" But her anger was nothing compared to Carol's reaction. My stepmother's face turned bright red, and I could see the social embarrassment burning in her eyes. This was her worst nightmare, being humiliated in front of the people whose approval she craved most. "Jessica, Carol's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "You clumsy fool! How could you do this to us?" She rushed over to Mrs. Patterson, apologizing frantically. "I'm so sorry, so very sorry." She's always been careless, but this is inexcusable. I tried to explain what happened, how Amy had tripped me, but when I looked around for support, Amy was standing there with the most innocent expression on her face. "I don't know what she's talking about," Amy said sweetly. "She just tripped over her own feet. She's always been so clumsy." The guests were all staring at me with a mixture of pity and judgment. I felt my cheeks burning with shame as Carol continued her public punishment of me. "She's not really family," Carol announced to the room, her voice carrying clearly. "My late husband felt sorry for her, but obviously we've been too lenient." Those words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. Not really family. In front of all these people, she had just erased my entire existence, my father's love, everything I thought I belonged to. Mrs. Patterson demanded that I personally pay for her ruined dress and dry cleaning for everyone who got splattered. Carol agreed immediately, volunteering my money without even asking me. I was forced to apologize to each guest individually while Carol explained how embarrassed she was by my behavior. The worst part wasn't the money or even the humiliation. It was watching Amy stand there with that satisfied smile, knowing she had orchestrated the whole thing and no one would ever believe me. I realized in that moment that I had been living a lie. These people didn't just dislike me, they actively wanted to hurt me. When I finally worked up the courage to confront Amy about tripping me, she denied it completely. "You're just trying to blame me for your own clumsiness," she said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. This is exactly the kind of thing she always does, never takes responsibility for anything. Carol's reaction was swift and brutal. "Enough!" she screamed at me. "You've embarrassed us enough for one night. Get out! Get out of this house right now!" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Carol, please, I can explain what really happened." "I don't want to hear another word from you," she cut me off. "You've shown your true colors tonight. Get out and don't come back until you learn some respect and responsibility." She grabbed my arm and physically pushed me toward the front door. The guests were all watching this spectacle unfold, some looking uncomfortable but none stepping in to help. I caught glimpses of shocked faces, whispered conversations, people pulling out their phones to record my humiliation. The front door slammed behind me with a finality that echoed through my soul. I heard the lock turn immediately after. Through the window, I could see the party continuing, Carol making more apologies, Amy playing the sympathetic sister role perfectly. And then the rain started. At first, it was just a light drizzle, but within minutes it became a heavy downpour. I was stuck outside in my white dress, which was now completely see-through and clinging to my body. The wine stains on my clothes mixed with the rainwater, creating pink streams down my arms and legs. I banged on the front door, pleading to be let back in, but no one answered. I could see people inside looking at me through the windows, but they turned away when they saw me watching. The neighbors who might have helped were either at the party or had deliberately closed their curtains to avoid getting involved in our family drama. I sat down on the front steps of what used to be my home, rain soaking through every thread of clothing I had on. My phone was inside, my purse was inside, my keys were inside. I had nothing but the soggy dress on my back and the crushing realization that I was completely alone in the world. The rain got heavier, and I started shivering uncontrollably. I thought about walking to the park, maybe finding a bench with some cover, but everything was flooding, and I could barely see through the downpour. Part of me wondered if Carol was right. Maybe I was worthless. Maybe I didn't deserve a family. Maybe this was exactly what I had coming. That's when I saw the headlights approaching through the rain. The car moved slowly down our street, and as it got closer, I realized it wasn't just any car. It was a Rolls-Royce, sleek and silver, the kind of vehicle that belonged in movies, not in our middle-class neighborhood. It pulled up directly in front of our house and stopped. I watched through the rain as the driver's side window rolled down slowly. The man inside was probably in his mid-30s, with kind eyes and dark hair. He was wearing an expensive suit, but his expression was concerned, not judgmental. "Excuse me," he called out. his voice gentle despite having to speak over the rain. "Are you all right?" I must have looked like a disaster. Soaking wet, shivering, probably with mascara running down my cheeks. But this stranger was looking at me like I was a person who mattered, not a problem to be solved or ignored. I started to say I was fine, because that's what you're supposed to say, but the words wouldn't come. I wasn't fine. I was the furthest thing from fine that I'd ever been in my life. He turned off the car and stepped out, immediately opening an umbrella. Without hesitation, he walked over to where I was sitting and held the umbrella over both of us. Then he took off his suit jacket and draped it around my shoulders. "My name is Daniel," he said simply. "And no one should be out here in weather like this. Would you like somewhere warm to stay tonight?" I should have been scared. Every safety lesson I'd ever learned told me not to get in a car with a stranger, especially not when I was vulnerable and alone. But there was something in his eyes, a kindness that I hadn't seen directed at me in years, that made me trust him instantly. "I don't have anywhere else to go," I admitted, my voice barely audible over the rain. "Then let me help," he said, and it wasn't a question or a demand. It was simply an offer, freely given with no strings attached. Daniel helped me into his car, which was incredibly warm and dry. The leather seats were the most comfortable things I'd ever felt, and he immediately turned up the heat and handed me a soft blanket from the back seat. "There's a hotel downtown," he said as we drove through the rain. "They'll have everything you need, dry clothes, hot food, a warm bed. We can figure out everything else tomorrow." I wanted to ask why he was helping me, what he expected in return, but I was too exhausted and grateful to question the first kindness I'd received in what felt like forever. Instead, I found myself telling him what had happened, how my own family had thrown me out, how I had nowhere to go. Daniel listened without judging, occasionally nodding or asking gentle questions, but never making me feel like I had to justify my situation. When I finished my story, he was quiet for a moment before speaking. "I'm sorry that happened to you," he said simply. "No one deserves to be treated that way, especially by people who claim to love them." The hotel he took me to was nicer than anywhere I'd ever stayed. Daniel spoke quietly to the manager while I waited in the lobby, still wrapped in his jacket and the blanket. Within minutes, I was being escorted to a beautiful suite with floor-to-ceiling windows and a bathroom bigger than my bedroom at home. Room service arrived with dry clothes in my exact size, hot soup, and fresh towels. Daniel had thought of everything, but when I tried to thank him, he brushed off my gratitude like it was nothing. "Get some rest," he said from the doorway. "We can talk more tomorrow if you want to. There's no pressure, no expectations. Just take care of yourself tonight." After he left, I stood in that beautiful hotel room and cried for the first time all evening. Not tears of sadness or humiliation, but tears of overwhelming relief. A complete stranger had shown me more kindness in 2 hours than my own family had shown me in years. The next morning, Daniel returned with coffee and pastries. In the daylight, I could see that he was even more handsome than I'd realized, but more importantly, his kindness hadn't been a one-night thing. He genuinely cared about what happened to me. Over breakfast, he told me his story. He had been abandoned by his own family when he was 16, left to survive on the streets with nothing but determination and hope. He'd lived in his car, worked in restaurant kitchens for minimum wage, and slowly built himself up from nothing. "I started with one food truck," he explained. 20 years later, I own a chain of restaurants across 3 states, but I never forgot what it felt like to have nothing, to be dismissed by people who were supposed to love me. Daniel offered me a job at his company headquarters, not out of pity, but because he saw potential in me that I'd never seen in myself. He provided a beautiful apartment, a fresh start, and most importantly, he introduced me to his restaurant family, dozens of employees who had all been helped by Daniel at various points in their lives. For the first time in my adult life, I was surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. I discovered that I had a natural talent for business, for understanding what customers wanted, for managing people and projects. Under Daniel's mentorship, I flourished in ways I never thought possible. 6 months later, Daniel and I were attending another charity gala across town. I was wearing an elegant blue gown, my hair styled perfectly, my confidence radiating from every pore. I had become the successful woman I was always meant to be, and I was engaged to the most wonderful man I'd ever known. Carol and Amy were at the same gala, though they didn't recognize me at first. I watched them from across the room, still playing their same games, still looking for people to impress and use. When Mrs. Patterson approached me with a warm smile and started praising my work with Daniel's charity foundation, Carol's head snapped around in recognition. The look of shock on Carol's face was priceless, but even better was the moment when Daniel and I announced our engagement. Carol tried to approach me, suddenly claiming me as her dear stepdaughter she had always been so proud of. But I had learned to set boundaries. "I'm sorry," I said politely but firmly, "but we're not family. You made that very clear the night you threw me out in the rain." The beautiful thing about my new life wasn't the money or the status, though those were nice. It was the people who surrounded me with genuine love and respect. Daniel's restaurant staff became my chosen family, each with their own story of hardship overcome with kindness. When Daniel and I bought the house where I grew up, it wasn't about revenge. It was about healing. We offered Carol and Amy jobs at our newest restaurant, with the understanding that they would need to work hard and treat others with respect. They accepted, and slowly, I watched them learn what I had always known, that kindness and hard work matter more than social status or blood relations. My wedding day was everything I'd dreamed of as a little girl, surrounded by people who truly loved me. Carol and Amy attended as employees who had earned their invitation through changed behavior and genuine effort to make amends. My real family, Daniel and our chosen family of friends and colleagues, filled the rest of the seats. As I walked down the aisle toward Daniel, I thought about that night in the rain when I felt like my life was over. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing in disguise. Being thrown out by people who never really loved me led me to people who did. That spilled glass of wine didn't ruin my life. It revealed the life I was supposed to have all along. And as Daniel took my hand and promised to love and cherish me forever, I realized that sometimes family isn't about blood or marriage certificates. Sometimes family is about people who see you at your lowest point and choose to lift you up instead of walking away. I learned that night in the rain that my worth isn't determined by how others treat me. I deserve love, respect, and kindness. And when you believe that about yourself, the right people will see it too. Sometimes they come in the form of a stranger in a Rolls-Royce, offering an umbrella and a second chance at happiness. Jessica's story proves that sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the one we're born into. If this touched your heart, please like and subscribe. And remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. You deserve love and respect, and sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places. What would you have done in Jessica's situation? Let me know in the comments below.